Elias Monroe had never been a man of extravagant fantasies. Yet even he couldn't stop the tiny flicker of hope that kept slipping into his imagination as he approached the Whitmore Gallery that late morning. For weeks he had rehearsed this moment in his small Queens apartment, standing before a curator of influence, presenting the single painting he believed carried the sum of his lifetime's emotions. It was supposed to be a quiet triumph, the kind where no one applauds, but something in the air shifts. A door creaks open. A new path reveals itself. He wasn't reaching for fame. He only wanted acknowledgement, a sign he wasn't invisible. The Whitmore Gallery rose like a marble monolith on West 24th Street, its facade polished to an almost icy sheen, reflecting the skyline in distorted fragments. People passing by rarely stopped to look. Those who entered had purpose. Collectors in tailored coats, critics with guarded eyes, artists who had already earned their place among the fortunate few. Elias stopped at the entrance, adjusting the strap of the canvas bag over his shoulder. Inside it was the painting, his painting. Wild strokes of red and blue and deep violet, colors colliding like storms smashing into one another. He had painted it in a fever of sleepless nights, each stroke a confession he didn't have the courage to say aloud. The painting had terrified him when it was finished. It revealed too much. It was too honest. But honesty was the only weapon he had left against the years of obscurity. He stood before the tall glass doors, watching his faint reflection tremble slightly. A man in his early 50s, hair graying at the temples, beard unkempt but trimmed enough to seem intentional, eyes holding a persistent exhaustion that slept beneath the surface. His clothes were neat, though worn. The sort of attire belonging to someone who wanted to appear presentable but had never learned the art of effortless refinement. For a fleeting moment, he considered turning back, as if retreat could spare him from something he didn't yet know. But he exhaled slowly, straightened his shoulders, and pushed the door open. The interior swallowed him in a hush of echoing footsteps and pristine white walls. The gallery smelled faintly of lemon polish and something colder. Ambition, perhaps. Art pieces hung in carefully curated arrangements, each illuminated by pinpoint spotlights that cast long shadows on the floor. A receptionist behind a minimalist desk glanced up at him with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "May I help you?" she asked. I'm here to see Aaron Hale," Elias stammered, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat. "We spoke by email." She nodded, typing something quickly on her computer. "Ah, yes, Mr. Monroe. She'll be out shortly. You can wait over there." She gestured to a sleek black bench positioned beneath a sculpture of twisted metal that looked like a tangle of frozen vines. Elias sat carefully, resting the canvas bag at his feet. He watched the light glint across the metal sculpture, trying to steady his breath. This was just another gallery, he told himself. Just another curator. It didn't define him, but his heart refused to calm. This moment, whether he liked it or not, mattered. Minutes passed, or maybe it was longer. His sense of time had begun to warp under the weight of anticipation. Then he heard the clicking of heels approaching from the hallway. A sharp, commanding rhythm. Aaron Hale emerged like a blade drawn from its sheath. Tall, elegant, and unervingly composed. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that contrasted with the brightness of the room. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek knot, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Monroe," she said, offering a hand that was cool to the touch. "Let's have a look." She led him to a smaller, more private exhibition room, devoid of artwork but equipped with a single long table and several chairs, an evaluation space designed to strip away anything that could distract from the piece being judged. It felt like a sterile operating room for art, where creations either survived or perished. "Go ahead," she said, gesturing toward the table. Elias nodded, his fingers trembling slightly as he unzipped the canvas bag. He lifted the painting out with the gentleness of someone handling a newborn, setting it upright on the table. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Even his breathing sounded intrusive. Erin approached slowly, arms crossed, her eyes narrowing as she studied the painting. The silence stretched. Her gaze traveled across the chaotic colors, but something about her rigid posture told Elias she wasn't letting the painting speak to her. She was analyzing, categorizing, measuring it against invisible criteria he couldn't hope to understand. Finally, she exhaled through her nose. A soft, dismissive sound. "It's heavy," she said. "Emotionally heavy. Overwrought, even." Elias swallowed hard. Yes, I suppose it came from a difficult place." "Difficult is fine," she replied curtly. "But this is bleak. It doesn't invite the viewer in. Pushes them away." She stepped back, shaking her head faintly. "Art needs to resonate with the current market. People want hope, vibrance, a sense of escape. This feels like staring into a storm without any shelter." "That's intentional," Elias said, the words leaving him before he could restrain them. "Storms are part of life. They're necessary. You can't find the light without." She cut him off sharply. "Mr. Monroe, we don't have space for work that feels despairing. It won't sell." Elias felt something punch through his chest. "I'm not painting to sell." "That," she said coolly, "is precisely the problem." He blinked, stunned by how easily she dismissed not just the painting, but him entirely. Erin stepped away, her decision finalized. "I appreciate you bringing it in, truly, but this isn't the direction our gallery is pursuing." She uncrossed her arms, straightened her jacket, and gave him a polite but terminal nod. "You can take it back." For a moment, Elias couldn't move. His hands felt foreign, his body hollow. Then, mechanically, he reached for the painting, sliding it back into the canvas bag. He didn't look at Erin, afraid she might see the fracture spreading through him. He didn't want her pity. He didn't want anything from her anymore. "Thank you for your time," he murmured. He walked out without waiting for a reply. The reception desk blurred as he passed. The city's brightness hit him like a wave when he stepped outside, and yet everything felt muted, as though he were standing behind thick glass. People hurried past him, unaware of the small tragedy unfolding in the quiet of his chest. He walked aimlessly at first, letting the city drag him along its currents. Manhattan roared with life. Taxis honking, street vendors shouting, musicians playing for coins, but Elias felt as if he were drifting underwater. Each sound came distorted, distant. His footsteps seemed to belong to someone else. He passed coffee shops full of laughter, boutiques with brightly dressed mannequins, and towering office buildings shedding crowds of professionals. They all seemed to exist in a different universe, untouched by rejection. Meanwhile, his heart carried the fresh bruise of being told his truth was too dark, too heavy, too unsellable. He wondered if Erin was right. Maybe he had misjudged himself. Maybe what he called honesty was merely self-indulgence. Maybe he was blind to his own limitations. The doubts swirled inside him like ink spreading through water. By the time he reached West 26th Street, fatigue settled into his bones. He slowed, noticing a narrow alley framed by worn brick walls and littered with old posters peeling at the edges. The alley breathed a kind of forgotten solitude he found strangely comforting. He stepped into it, drawn by an impulse he didn't fully understand. The walls were decorated with layers of graffiti, tags, incomplete murals, political slogans half scrubbed away. Shadows clung to the corners like reluctant memories. Elias stopped halfway down the alley. A lamppost flickered above him, casting intermittent light on the rough brick. He unzipped the canvas bag. His painting emerged once more, the vivid colors catching the dim glow. Here, away from the perfect gallery walls, it felt different, more alive, more vulnerable. The imperfections in the brick seemed to echo its turmoil. A sudden calm settled over Elias. Perhaps it wasn't the painting that had failed him. Perhaps it was simply in the wrong place. He looked around, found a rusted nail left from some long-forgotten poster, and gently hung the painting on it. Sagged slightly, crooked, but somehow that felt right. Honest. He stepped back. The painting stared back at him, its chaotic colors blending with the rawness of the alley. It belonged here, among forgotten voices and silent stories, where truth didn't need permission to exist. "If nowhere else will take you," he whispered, Then here, at least here you exist. As he turned to leave, the wind rustled a stray piece of newspaper across the pavement. The city carried on behind him, unaware of the small miracle he had just abandoned, and unaware of the storm it would soon ignite. And somewhere beyond that alley, on the other side of the waking city, a man named Hudson Cole was preparing to take his morning walk. A walk that would lead him directly into the heart of everything Elias believed he had lost. Morning arrived in Manhattan with a kind of indifferent brilliance, the sun climbing between glass towers like a performer bored with its own routine. The city stirred in waves, engines rumbling awake, delivery trucks rattling across uneven pavement, commuters swarming into subway entrances like tides pulled by obligations they never questioned. And somewhere in the middle of this orchestrated chaos, Hudson Cole stepped out of his brownstone on West 22nd with a half-finished thought in his mind and a scowl forming between his eyebrows. He didn't often scowl. Not publicly, at least. Critics, especially critics of his stature, were supposed to maintain an air of controlled expression. Amused detachment, feigned curiosity, discreet superiority. But today the scowl came easily. Too easily. The previous night's exhibition at Vander and Noble had drained him in a way he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't that the art was bad art in its own twisted way could still be invigorating, a chance to flex his analytical teeth. No, the problem was worse. The art was soulless, predictable, manufactured to impress buyers who wanted to feel cultured without ever being challenged. Hudson hated that kind of art with a silent, simmering fury. He adjusted the scarf around his neck, the January cold sharp enough to nip at his skin, and headed toward his favorite cafe. But halfway down the block, he paused. Construction crews had blocked off the street, and yellow caution tape fluttered like irritated birds in the wind. He sighed. The detour would force him either into the morning crowd on 7th Avenue or through one of the lesser-known alleys. He chose the alley. Hudson Cole preferred walking alone when his mind was restless. Solitude sharpened his senses. Silence gave him space to think. And today he needed space more than he needed caffeine. The alley greeted him with uneven cobblestones and walls cluttered with graffiti in varying stages of defacement. It was narrow enough that two people couldn't comfortably walk side by side. A skipping of sunlight made its way down in slanted beams, catching dust motes suspended like tiny, drifting galaxies. He walked past a rusted dumpster, past an abandoned bicycle frame chained hopelessly to a bent pole, past torn posters that clung to the brick as if refusing to let go of their relevance. His shoes clicked a steady rhythm, one that eased the tension in his shoulders. Cities often hid their most interesting truths in places where no one bothered to look. And that, he would later realize, was precisely why fate had led him here. He was halfway through the alley when a flash of red caught his eye, jarring, abrupt, like a wound split open beneath the morning light. Without intending to, he slowed. Then he stopped completely. The painting hung there on the brick wall as if the alley itself had decided to reveal a secret. It was hung crookedly, supported only by a rusty nail, but the composition, the emotional violence of the colors, pulled at his attention with magnetic insistence. Hudson took a step closer, then another. He stared. The world around him thinned until it was only him and the painting, as though time itself had bowed out in reverence. The reds were alive, pulsing like heat rising from scorched earth. Blues churned in layers beneath them like tides of memory dragging something heavy and unspoken to the surface. Splashes of yellow clung to the edges, a faint, trembling hope straining to be seen. It was a storm trapped in paint, a confession given shape. Hudson felt something in his chest shift, an ache blooming unexpectedly behind his ribs. He hadn't felt that sensation in years, not since the early days of his career when he still believed art could save people, or at least save something inside them. He stepped closer still, close enough to see the brushstrokes. Furious, urgent, desperate. Whoever had painted this hadn't been performing. They hadn't been trying to impress anyone. This wasn't created for a gallery or a collector. It was created because it had to be, because something inside the artist would have burned them alive if they hadn't released it onto canvas. Hudson reached out but stopped just short of touching the surface. A small, almost reverent smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Who are you?" he whispered. There was no signature, no plaque, no name, just raw humanity pinned against a forgotten wall. He looked around, suddenly aware of how bizarre it was to find something like this here, in an alley that smelled faintly of damp cardboard and distant exhaust fumes. What kind of artist would abandon a piece like this? Not abandon, he corrected himself silently. This was placed here. Deliberately, he stepped back, wanting to take in the entirety of the piece. It stood out against the decay of the alley like a heart beating in the ribs of the city. And yet, it fit too well, almost as though the suffering inside the painting belonged among these bricks, as though the alley itself understood. Hudson felt his pulse quicken. For a long moment he simply stood there, letting the painting seep into his awareness. The cold air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. He had found something rare. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out his phone with hands that had begun to tremble. He framed the image carefully in the camera, pressing the shutter softly as if afraid loudness could disturb the essence of the thing. He took another photo, then another, but even as he captured it, he knew no photograph could hold what the painting truly carried. He lowered the phone slowly, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "This is real," he said under his breath. Finally, something real. He stood there for several more minutes, absorbing the work in layers. His mind raced with possibilities, articles, analyses, questions, interpretations, but beneath the professional instinct was something more vulnerable, something personal. He felt alive again. He glanced once more around the alley, hoping the artist might appear, or that some sign, some clue, would reveal their identity. But there was only the murmur of the city and the whisper of the wind threading through broken shutters. Hudson stepped back, clutching his phone, the weight of significance settling on his shoulders. He needed the world to see this, not because it would impress them, but because it would remind them what art could still be when stripped of pretension. As he walked toward the end of the alley, the painting remained behind him, a silent witness to the moment his life pivoted in an unexpected direction. The city regained its volume, traffic roaring louder as he stepped back onto the sidewalk of 10th Avenue. People passed by, unaware of the revelation he had just encountered. Some clutched coffee cups, others muttered into phones, some hurried to avoid the cold. The ordinary continued, oblivious. Hudson felt the urge to return to the painting, to stand in front of it again before reality could dilute the experience. But he resisted. He knew what he had seen, and he knew what he had to do. He headed straight toward his office, a compact yet elegant workspace inside a restored warehouse building. The elevator ride felt interminably slow, his mind leaping ahead to the words he needed to write. When the doors finally opened with a subdued chime, he strode down the hallway, unlocked his office, and sat at his desk. The screen of his laptop glowed to life. For several minutes he did nothing but stare at it, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, as if a dam finally burst, he began to type. The words poured out of him in a stream, unfiltered, unpolished, urgent. He wrote about the rawness of truth, about art that dared to bleed, about the quiet bravery of vulnerability. He described the painting with such intensity he felt almost feverish. He wrote as a critic, yes, but also as a man who had rediscovered faith in his vocation. Hours passed unnoticed. When he finally leaned back in his chair, he knew the piece was one of the best he'd written in years. He read it over once, twice, each time convinced that the world needed to read this, needed to feel what he felt. He attached the photographs, added the headline, "A masterpiece in a Manhattan alley. Why anonymous art still matters." Then he clicked send. The article went live that evening. Hours later, notifications buzzed across Manhattan like sparks from a struck wire. Hudson's phone lit up repeatedly. Calls from gallery owners, editors, colleagues, strangers. Social media flooded with reposts, comments, theories. People speculated on the unknown artist, debated the meaning behind the colors, posted their own interpretations. The alley became a point of pilgrimage, drawing curious onlookers long after the sun had set. Hudson watched it all unfold from the quiet of his living room. It felt surreal, watching a tidal wave rise from something as obscure as an alley painting. But beneath the amazement, a deeper feeling rooted itself in his chest. A determination to find the artist. Whoever they were, they had changed something in him, and he needed to tell them that. But even as the city buzzed, even as crowds began gathering in front of a painting they had previously ignored, the one person who remained utterly unaware of the chaos was Elias Monroe. At that very moment, he sat alone in his apartment, oblivious to his phone vibrating with notifications he hadn't checked, unaware that his painting, his once rejected, once abandoned painting, was igniting conversations across the country. He simply sat at his small wooden desk, staring at an unfinished sketchbook, wondering if he would ever paint again. He had no idea his life had already changed. He had no idea someone had found the light he thought no one would ever see. And soon, very soon, there would be a knock at his door that would carry the weight of destiny. Elias Monroe spent the evening hunched over the small, circular table in his kitchen, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside him. He'd been staring at the blank sketchbook for so long that the whiteness had started to blur into a kind of restless fog. The radiator rattled intermittently against the winter cold, but even that familiar clatter couldn't cut through the quiet that wrapped itself around the apartment. He didn't know why he hadn't touched a pencil in hours. Maybe he was afraid of what would come out now, afraid the rejection still clung to his fingers. The weight of that moment at the gallery, Aaron Hale's dismissive tone, the sterile room swallowing up his work as if it had no right to exist. Every detail replayed in his mind as insistently as a haunting melody. He closed the sketchbook gently, as though shutting it might silence the echo of everything he'd felt. The apartment was dim. A single lamp cast a small pool of golden light over the table, leaving the rest of the space in softened shadow. His home had always been simple. A handful of canvases leaned against the wall, a shelf filled with brushes cleaned far more recently than they'd been used, a small sofa draped with an old knitted blanket. The windows showed the faint glow of queens at night. He didn't know what he was expecting. Nothing, really. The day had left him drained, hollow, uncertain whether he even belonged to the world of art anymore. His phone vibrated suddenly, the muted buzz breaking the silence. Elias blinked, reaching for it half-heartedly. Notifications flooded the screen. More than he had seen in months, maybe years. Dozens of missed calls, scores of unread messages, texts from acquaintances. "Is that your painting on the news? Dude, call me now. I swear that's yours in that article." What is happening? Articles forwarded from people he didn't even think had his number anymore. It didn't make sense. He hadn't posted anything. He hadn't shown the work to anyone except the Whitmore Gallery. And his painting. His breath caught. The alley. He opened one of the links, and suddenly the world burst onto his screen. Photographs of the painting. Hudson Cole's sharply written article. Hundreds of comments. Tens of thousands of shares. Theories swirling like a tempest. The title repeating again and again. A masterpiece in a Manhattan alley. Why anonymous art still matters. The words felt unreal, as if he were reading about someone else. His hands trembled so badly he nearly dropped the phone. He scrolled down, absorbing Hudson's lyrical praise, the near-mythic language he used to describe the painting, the raw pulse, the terrifying honesty, the violent tenderness, the storm made flesh. Elias felt dizzy. His knees weakened, and he lowered himself onto the wooden chair before he could collapse. His mind raced in 1,000 directions, each thought colliding with the next. Someone had found it. Someone had understood it. Someone had seen what he was trying to say. Not just someone. Hudson Cole, one of the most respected critics in the country. And the world, God, the world had taken notice. Crowds had gathered in front of the alley, snapping photos, leaving flowers, posting videos. A few had even lit candles beneath it, as though paying tribute to something sacred. The tea beside him had gone stone cold, but he suddenly felt heat rushing through his body, a warmth rising in waves from the center of his chest. It was bewildering, terrifying, beautiful. He stood abruptly, pacing back and forth, hands clasped atop his head. Could this be real? Was it some kind of prank? Had someone reposted an old painting of his? Had someone taken credit? What if the artist's identity was revealed and someone tried to claim it? But no. Hudson's article emphasized the absence of a signature. Anonymous. Nameless. Elias pressed a hand to his forehead, breath uneven. He needed to think. He needed. A knock echoed through the apartment. Sharp, firm, insistent. Elias froze. The sound sliced through the air like a blade. For a moment he wondered if he'd imagined it. But then it came again, 3 unmistakable raps on the door. His heart rate quickened as he stepped toward the hallway. At this hour, visitors were rare, almost unheard of. His neighbors kept to themselves, and he hadn't invited anyone over in months. He hesitated, fingers hovering just above the deadbolt. Another knock. Not aggressive, not impatient, simply confident. He swallowed, drew a steadying breath, and unlocked the door. Hudson Cole stood there. The critic's presence filled the hallway, not with arrogance, but with a kind of intense, controlled energy, as if he had been holding his breath since discovering the painting. His coat, still speckled with lingering flakes of snow, framed his sharp features. His eyes, keen, bright, probing, met Elias's with a recognition that made Elias's stomach twist. "Mr. Monroe," Hudson said softly. Elias felt a jolt of shock run through him, though he tried to hide it. "You know who I am?" Hudson offered a small, almost reverent smile. "I do now." For a heartbeat, neither man spoke. The hallway's dim light pooled around them like a stage awaiting direction. "May I come in?" Hudson asked. Elias stepped aside, nodding. Of course. As Hudson entered, his eyes drifted briefly around the apartment, taking in the scattered brushes, the stacked canvases, the faint smell of old paint lingering in the air. Elias felt exposed, as though the critic were reading the story of his life from the objects around him. Hudson removed his gloves and tucked them into his coat pocket. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "Not at all," Elias answered, though his voice betrayed the tremor beneath. Hudson turned toward him fully now, hands clasped in front of him. "I came because your work moved me, deeply, more than anything I've seen in years." Elias looked away, unable to withstand the intensity of those words. "I didn't know anyone would find it. I didn't think." "That's precisely why it's extraordinary," Hudson interrupted gently. "It wasn't created to be seen. It wasn't crafted to please. It was honest, brutally, painfully honest." He paused, letting the sentiment settle. "Art has grown timid," Hudson continued. "Predictable, decorative rather than meaningful. But your painting, it felt like a confession carved from the marrow of grief and hope." Elias felt something inside him soften, fracture, and reform all at once. Hudson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It deserved better than a forgotten alley wall." Elias swallowed, eyes shining with something unspoken. "It's the only place that didn't reject it." Hudson's jaw tightened, as though absorbing the weight of that truth. "Then the world was wrong. Not you." The words hit Elias with an unexpected force. He steadied himself against the table, feeling a tremor ripple through his body. Hudson's gaze softened. "May I ask why you left it there?" Elias hesitated. The memory of that moment, the darkness, the loneliness, the desperation, still clawed at his thoughts. "I thought I had nothing left to lose," he whispered. "I thought, if it didn't belong in a gallery, maybe it belonged nowhere, or everywhere, or, I don't know. Maybe I just couldn't bear to take it home after hearing what she said." "Erin Hale." Hudson's tone held a subtle edge. "She said it was too bleak, too heavy, unmarketable." Elias let out a hollow laugh. "She told me that was the problem." Hudson studied him. "There is nothing wrong with truth, isn't there?" Elias whispered. "It feels like the world avoids it at all costs." "Not always," Hudson said. "Sometimes the right eyes find it when you least expect." He let that sit for a moment before taking a slow breath. "I want to help you," he said. "Not because I pity you, but because I believe the world needs your art." Elias blinked, stunned. "Help me how?" "Let me introduce you to the world," Hudson replied simply. Properly this time. Elias stared, overwhelmed. "I don't even know if I can paint again." Hudson shook his head gently. "You already painted something unforgettable. And whether you meant to or not, you've started something. A conversation. A movement, perhaps. Don't silence it now." Silence enveloped them, thick with possibility. Finally, Elias exhaled shakily. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Hudson murmured. Elias looked at him, really looked. The man standing before him wasn't speaking as a critic, but as someone who had felt something stir inside himself. Someone who believed in him. Elias began, but the words tangled in his throat. Hudson stepped back slightly, giving him space. "You don't need to decide tonight, but I'll be back, and the world is waiting, whether you're ready or not." Elias nodded slowly, breath unsteady. "I'll think about it." Hudson smiled, soft, genuine. "That's all I ask." He picked up his gloves from the table, slipped them on, and headed to the door. But before stepping out, he paused and turned back. "One more thing," he said. "Your painting? It's safe. Not a single person has touched it. People are guarding it like a shrine." Elias's eyes widened. "Guarding it?" Hudson nodded. "You've created something that belongs to everyone now. They're protecting it even if they don't know your name yet." A warmth flooded Elias's chest. Different from shock, different from fear. Something like belonging. Hudson opened the door, letting the cold winter air spill into the apartment. "Good night, Mr. Monroe," he said. "Good night," Elias replied softly. The door closed. Elias stood there for a long moment, the quiet closing around him again. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one hummed with possibility, with a kind of trembling electricity, as though the air itself knew something monumental was unfolding. He walked back to the table, sat down slowly, and opened the sketchbook. For the first time that night, he picked up his pencil. His hand hovered over the page. Outside, the city pulsed with restless energy. Crowds gathering, cameras flashing, conversations spreading like wildfire. His life, once static, predictable, small, had already begun shifting into something else. Something he wasn't sure he understood yet. He touched the pencil to the paper. A single line, then another. He didn't know what he was drawing. He only knew he had started again. Soon the world would know his name. And soon still, he would discover that sudden fame carried shadows of its own. Sleep did not come for Elias Monroe that night. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling of his dimly lit bedroom, watching soft shadows crawl slowly across the plaster as the headlights of passing cars swept through the blinds. The city hummed outside, distant sirens, a dog barking, the faint rumble of the subway. But inside the apartment, everything was unnervingly still, as though the air itself were waiting for something. He replayed every second of Hudson Cole's visit. The knock, the voice, the praise, the sincerity in the critic's eyes, the sense, impossible, surreal, that someone had finally seen him. Not just his art, but him. It made him feel both weightless and terrified. But above all else, there was this: he had picked up a pencil again. He had begun to draw. A line, then another, until the page slowly filled with shapes he hadn't planned, emotions translated into form without permission or logic. He had forgotten he could lose himself like that. Forgotten the way creation felt when it came not from ambition, not from fear, but from a need so deep that ignoring it was like trying not to breathe. By the time dawn brushed pale light across the window, Elias had barely slept an hour. His eyes stung, but there was a spark beneath the exhaustion. Something fragile, warm, waiting to bloom. He pushed himself out of bed, ran a hand through his graying hair, and stepped into the living room. The sketchbook still lay open on the table. He approached it cautiously, as though afraid the vision he remembered was only a trick of the night. It wasn't. The page was full lines sweeping and curling into shapes that looked almost like a new language. There was a face emerging from the chaos, fractured but resolute, surrounded by broken forms that could have been wings or memories or both. Elias stared, stunned by the certainty of the drawing. He hadn't planned it, but perhaps that was the point. Maybe the best work was always the one that came unannounced. A sudden vibration on the table startled him. His phone. He picked it up, expecting another flood of messages about the alley painting, but it was a single unknown number. For a moment he considered ignoring it, his heart tightening in uncertainty. But something urged him to answer. "Hello?" he said, voice groggy. "Mr. Monroe?" A woman's voice replied, smooth, crisp, professional. "Yes, this is he. My name is Celia Hart. I'm the director of the Midtown Art Collective. I hope I'm not calling too early." Elias blinked. "Oh, no, not at all. I'm reaching out because I saw the article Mr. Cole wrote last night. And after visiting the alley early this morning, I felt compelled to contact you." Her tone carried a controlled excitement, as though she were trying to remain composed but struggling to contain genuine admiration. "Your work is extraordinary. I would love to discuss the possibility of an exhibition." Elias gripped the phone tighter. I'm sorry. Are you sure you have the right person?" Celia laughed softly. "Trust me, Mr. Monroe. After reading Hudson's piece, I knew I had to find the artist behind it. And after I saw the painting in person, I knew I couldn't wait. Hudson was kind enough to give me your number." Elias felt something inside him jolt. "Hudson gave you my number?" "Yes," she said warmly. "He believes in your art. And now so do I." The apartment suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. I don't know what to say," Elias stammered. "Say you'll meet with me," Celia replied gently. "No pressure, just a conversation." He hesitated, but only for a moment. "Yes," he whispered. "I'll meet you." "Wonderful. I'll send details shortly." A pause. "And Mr. Monroe? Congratulations. The world is about to change for you." The call ended. Elias stared at the phone, unable to move. The world is about to change. The words echoed in his mind, heavy and electric. He sank slowly into the chair. His heart pounded as exhilaration intertwined with fear. He wasn't used to attention. He wasn't ready for crowds, for questions, for expectations. But part of him, deep inside, beneath the self-doubt and scars of rejection, burned with a quiet hope. Maybe this time would be different. A knock at the door startled him. Not Hudson's knock. This one was softer, hesitant. He approached cautiously and opened it. A young woman stood there, bundled in a thick scarf and knitted hat. She held a folded newspaper and looked at him with the sort of hesitant admiration that made Elias instinctively shrink back. "Are you?" she began, voice trembling slightly. "Are you the artist?" Elias froze. "Excuse me?" She unfolded the newspaper, showing him the front-page photograph of the alley painting. "This," she whispered, "this painting. Everyone says the artist is anonymous, but I live in this building. I saw you leave last night with a canvas. I think it's yours." Elias felt the ground tilt beneath him. His anonymity, what little remained, was dissolving. He began, but the words tangled in his throat. The young woman's eyes shimmered with emotion. "I just wanted to say, thank you. I looked at your painting this morning, and it felt like it understood something about me. About the things I don't say. I've never felt that before." Her sincerity shook him. "Thank you," Elias managed. Though the words felt small compared to the weight of her gratitude, she smiled softly. "I won't tell anyone. I just needed to thank you." And she left as quietly as she had come. Elias closed the door slowly, leaning back against it. He pressed his palms to his face, overwhelmed. The world outside his apartment was shifting like a tide rising too fast to outrun. And he wasn't sure if he was ready. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of messages, emails, calls, gallery offers, interview requests, invitations to speak at events. Reporters hovered near the alley, waiting for a glimpse of the mysterious artist. Cameras flashed. Social media churned with theories. Even the mayor's cultural office issued a statement praising the impact of unexpected urban art. By noon, Elias couldn't breathe. He slipped outside quietly, hood pulled over his head, and walked toward the subway. Instinct drew him toward Manhattan, toward the place where everything had begun, the alley. He emerged near Chelsea around midday. Crowds formed along West 26th Street, murmuring with curiosity. Street vendors had set up stands selling coffee to the growing mass of visitors wanting to see the phenomenon with their own eyes. Elias's heart lurched. He pushed through the throng cautiously, staying close to the buildings so no one would pay attention to him. When the mouth of the alley came into view, he stopped dead. His painting was still there, but now a rope barrier surrounded it. Volunteers, strangers who had taken it upon themselves to protect the artwork, stood nearby holding signs that read, "Please don't touch, respect the art, let it breathe." Candles flickered at the base of the wall. Someone had left a handwritten note beneath the painting. "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." Elias's vision blurred. He stepped deeper into the alley, each footfall carrying a mixture of awe and disbelief. People stood silently, as though visiting a sacred site. They studied the painting with reverence, some with tears in their eyes. A little boy tugged his father's sleeve. "Daddy, why is the picture sad?" The father knelt and whispered something Elias couldn't hear. The boy tilted his head, considering the colors anew. Then he said softly, "It looks brave to me." The words pierced Elias's heart. He turned away, needing air. The alley suddenly felt too full of meaning, of expectation, of emotion too intense to bear. He stepped back onto the sidewalk and let the cold wind wash over him. People were whispering, filming, photographing. He could feel the gravity of becoming someone they wanted to know, someone they would dissect and discuss. He wasn't prepared for fame. He never wanted it. Yet here it was, rushing toward him with unstoppable force. He walked quickly, nearly stumbling as he rounded a corner. The world buzzed around him. Honking cars, chattering tourists, clicking cameras, but he felt strangely detached, as though floating outside his own body. He didn't stop until he reached the Hudson River. The wind off the water was sharp, bracing, but its bite anchored him. He leaned against the railing, breath shaking. From behind him came a familiar voice. "Elias." He turned. Hudson Cole stood there, coat unbuttoned, hair tousled by the wind, eyes carrying that same intensity from the night before. "You saw it," Hudson said. Not a question, an understanding. "I had to," Elias murmured. Hudson moved beside him, leaning on the railing. For a moment, neither spoke. "This is overwhelming," Elias admitted quietly. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," Hudson said gently. "But sometimes art decides its own destiny." Elias laughed bitterly. "Destiny feels a lot like chaos." "Maybe," Hudson replied, "but chaos is where truth lives." Elias turned to him. "Why me?" Hudson held his gaze. "Because you were brave enough to be honest. Because your painting is a mirror people didn't know they needed." Elias lowered his eyes. "I don't know how to be whatever they think I am." Hudson's tone softened. "You don't have to be anything but yourself." Elias inhaled shakily. "And what if that's not enough?" Hudson faced him fully. "It already is." The wind carried their silence for a long moment. Finally, Hudson spoke again. "You have decisions to make, Elias. Big ones. Exhibitions, representation, interviews. People want to know you, but you need to ask yourself what you want." Elias stared out at the river, where sunlight shimmered on the water like fractured glass. "I don't know," he whispered. Hudson nodded. "Then we'll figure it out together." The word together lingered in the air, unexpected, steadying. Elias looked at him gratefully. "Thank you for everything." Hudson smiled faintly. "Don't thank me yet. The world's only just begun to knock on your door." Elias exhaled, watching a seagull arc across the sky. He knew Hudson was right. He knew life had shifted permanently, unmistakably. And somewhere deep inside him, beneath the fear, something else stirred. Something like momentum, something like purpose, something like hope. But hope, he would soon learn, could be a double-edged blade. And the next days would reveal just how sharp it could become. The days that followed unfolded with a bewildering intensity, as though the city had suddenly decided to speak his name aloud even before he fully understood it himself. Elias Monroe woke on the morning after his visit to the river with the uneasy sensation that something was pressing against the fragile edges of his quiet life. Something vast, uncontainable, and rapidly approaching. The first sign came with the morning light that leaked through the blinds, painting thin golden stripes across his kitchen floor. His phone was already buzzing when he entered the room, half awake and hoping for calm. It wasn't calm. His screen pulsed like a heartbeat in crisis. Emails, voicemails, interview requests, invitations to galleries, messages from strangers thanking him for his painting, reporters asking for quotes, former acquaintances suddenly remembering his existence. He set the phone down carefully, as though it were a dangerous animal he wasn't sure how to tame. His tea kettle whistled. He poured boiling water into a cracked ceramic mug he'd had for years, the steam curling upward like a ghost of routine that no longer quite belonged in this new world. He tried to center himself, but the buzz of his phone throbbed in the background, reminding him that nothing was quiet anymore. He finally silenced it, burying it beneath a kitchen towel as though that could muffle the weight of the expectations being hurled at him through the screen. The day had barely begun, and already he felt exhausted. He sat at his table, hands clasped, staring at the sketchbook, the one that had held the first sign of a new beginning. The drawing on the open page seemed to look back at him, fractured but determined, as if urging him forward. He wanted to listen, but a knot of dread twisted inside his chest. The more the world reached for him, the more he feared losing himself. A knock at the door shattered the stillness. Not sharp, not assertive.
Agente le knock, tentative.
Elias hesitated before rising, step by step, feeling as though the floor shifted slightly with every movement. He opened the door cautiously. Celia Hart stood outside, bundled in a navy coat, cheeks flushed from the cold. A brown leather portfolio was tucked under her arm. She smiled the moment he appeared, the kind of warm, disarming smile that suggested she was prepared to be patient with whatever emotional storm she might find on the other side of the threshold. "Good morning, Mr. Monroe," she said with a quiet enthusiasm. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Elias blinked. He hadn't expected to see her so soon. "No, not at all. Please come in." She stepped inside, brushing the cold off her shoulders, her eyes scanning the apartment with a curious appreciation. She lingered on the canvases propped against the wall, the brushes in jars, the faint smell of turpentine that clung to the room like memory. "This space suits you," she said thoughtfully. "It feels lived in, honest." Elias exhaled lightly. "It's small, but it's mine." Celia nodded, as if the simplicity of the statement carried more meaning than the words themselves. She placed her portfolio on the table and sat down, inviting him to do the same. "I came because I wanted to see you before the chaos grows," she said gently. "And it will grow, more than you can imagine." Elias ran a hand through his hair, the knot in his chest tightening. "I'm afraid I won't handle it well." "That's why I'm here," Celia replied. "To help you navigate it, to make sure you aren't swallowed by it." She opened her portfolio, revealing documents, photographs of her gallery, schedules, proposals already drafted overnight. Elias stared at them as though they were relics from a world he didn't know how to touch. "I don't know if I'm ready," he murmured. Celia leaned forward, her gaze steady. "I don't think readiness is the point. Some artists step into the spotlight because they chase it. Others," she paused, softening her voice, "others are chosen by their own truth. People recognize something in your work they can't articulate themselves. You've given them language." Elias looked down at his hands. "I'm just afraid of losing what made it real." "You won't," she assured. "Not if you stay anchored. Not if you choose carefully who stands beside you." The mention of that last part stirred something inside him. An image of Hudson Cole standing beside him by the river, face softened by the wind, eyes carrying both intensity and gentleness. Celia must have noticed his pause. Hudson told me he planned to check in on you this morning. He cares deeply about what happens next. Elias nodded faintly. He's been unexpectedly kind. Hudson only invests himself when he believes there is something worth protecting, Celia said. And he sees something in you. Elias felt heat rise to his cheeks. Unexpected, confusing.
I'm grateful.
Truly, I just don't know how to be the person everyone seems to think I am. You don't have to be anyone but yourself, Celia replied. Let the world adapt to you, not the other way around. She slid a document toward him. This is a proposal for a small exhibition. Not a grand debut, not a spectacle, just a curated space where your voice can breathe. He didn't open it. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words settle inside him like tentative seeds. I don't know if I'm ready, he repeated softly, but I want to try. Celia smiled, genuine, relieved. That's all I needed to hear. He signed nothing yet. She didn't push. She simply stood, gathering her portfolio. I'll give you time, she said, but not too much. The world is waiting, Elias, and so are those who need what you create. She touched his arm lightly, a gesture of support, not pressure, and left. The apartment felt quieter after she was gone. Quieter, but not empty. Something had shifted. He sat at the table long after the door clicked shut. But peace didn't last long. An hour later, his phone, still trapped beneath the kitchen towel, buzzed again, this time so persistently that ignoring it became impossible. He finally picked it up. A voicemail from a journalist at the New York Times. Another from a podcast producer. 2 from documentary filmmakers. Several from lesser-known galleries and art magazines. Scrolling through them made his stomach churn. The world wanted him, but what he feared most was that the world didn't truly know him. And once it did, maybe it wouldn't want him anymore. He set the phone down again, feeling suddenly claustrophobic in his own skin. He needed air. He threw on his coat and slipped outside, the cold immediately biting at his cheeks. He walked without direction, letting the city carry him, blending into crowds that didn't know they brushed past the very artist they were currently obsessing over. He moved through Chelsea like a ghost. Every corner buzzed with his name, though nobody recognized him. It was surreal, terrifying, strange. People debated fiercely about the meaning of the painting, speculating about the anonymous artist's identity. He must be young, someone said. There's too much energy in those strokes. No, another countered. That's not youth. That's life. The kind of truth you only paint after surviving something. He's probably already famous and doing some publicity stunt, a woman insisted. Elias slipped away before he heard more. He wandered until he reached the river again. He leaned against the railing, staring out at the gray water reflecting fragmented clouds. Felt like a metaphor he didn't want to analyze. Elias. He turned at the sound of Hudson Cole's voice. The critic approached with the familiar blend of grace and urgency, a combination Elias was slowly learning to recognize as his natural state. Hudson reached his side, breath visible in the cold air. I hoped I'd find you here. Elias attempted a smile. I needed quiet. Hudson let out a soft laugh. You picked the wrong week for that. Elias didn't laugh. He stared at the water. I don't know how to do this. Hudson studied him carefully. You don't have to know how. You just have to decide what matters. I don't want to be consumed, Elias whispered. I don't want to lose the part of me that painted that canvas. You won't, Hudson said firmly. Not if you keep listening to the honest part of yourself. Elias's throat tightened. What if honesty isn't enough? Hudson stepped closer, not touching, but near enough to offer warmth. Honesty is all you have, all any true artist has. The rest is noise. Elias closed his eyes, the wind brushing against his face. You're not alone in this, Hudson said gently. I'm here. Celia is here. We'll help you navigate the noise. For how long? Elias asked, unable to hide the vulnerability in his voice. Hudson's expression softened, an expression Elias had rarely seen anyone offer him with such sincerity. "As long as you want," Hudson murmured. The words lingered between them, fragile and charged. Elias turned to him fully, searching his eyes for any hint of insincerity. He found none, only conviction, and something else, something deeper, warmer, unnamed. The silence stretched, heavy with meaning neither had yet dared to speak aloud. Hudson was the one to break it, clearing his throat slightly. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "Something important." Elias's heart stuttered. "What is it?" Hudson's gaze flickered, conflicted. "It's about your painting, about what happens next. And someone has come forward, someone claiming to know you." Elias felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "Who?" he whispered. Hudson looked at him, hesitation darkening his eyes. "That," he said softly, "is what we need to talk about." The wind shifted along the Hudson River, carrying with it the metallic scent of winter and the distant hum of the city awakening behind them. Elias stood frozen, the critic's words still hanging in the air between them, fragile and heavy. Someone had come forward, someone claiming to know him. Hudson watched Elias carefully, as though worried any sudden movement might send him collapsing beneath the weight of everything that had happened. Elias swallowed, trying to steady the tremor in his voice. "Who is it?" he asked. Hudson hesitated, an unusual crack in the composure of a man so accustomed to delivering truth unflinchingly. Finally, he spoke. "His name is Mason Reed. He's a curator from Chicago. He says he worked with you years ago." Elias felt his breath hitch, a memory flickering. Too fast, too painful. Mason Reed. That name was a ghost wrapped in regret. A man who once stood beside him in a small gallery, promising partnership, only to vanish the moment things became difficult. A man who had praised Elias's early work, then rejected it just as swiftly when it failed to sell. The ache returned like an old wound. "He told reporters he recognized your style," Hudson continued, voice low. "He said he saw it the moment he looked at the painting." Elias looked away, hands tightening on the railing until his knuckles whitened. He felt the cold seep into his bones. "Why would he do that?" Elias murmured. "He hasn't spoken to me in years." "Because the world is paying attention now," Hudson said gently. "People want to attach themselves to you, to your story, to your rise. Fame, even in its earliest form, draws shadows." Elias closed his eyes. The truth of it stung. Hudson took a breath, choosing his next words carefully. "There's more." Elias opened his eyes slowly. "Mason is claiming he mentored you, that he guided your artistic voice, that without him your style wouldn't exist." The words hit Elias like a physical blow. "That's not true," Elias whispered. "He hardly knew me. He said my work was too personal, too unmarketable. He was the first to tell me I'd never make it." Hudson nodded, his jaw tight. "I know, but people are listening to him. And without your voice in the conversation, your real voice, they'll keep listening." Elias stared at the water, tears burning behind his eyes but refusing to fall. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I never wanted attention. I never wanted to defend myself. I only wanted to paint." "I know," Hudson replied. "But now people are defining your story for you. And if you don't speak, they'll write it their way." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind tugging gently at Elias's coat. Finally, Elias whispered, "What should I do?" Hudson looked at him with a softness that held no judgment, no expectation, only belief. "Tell the truth," he said. "The world already felt it through your painting. Now they need to hear it from you." Elias drew in a slow breath, feeling the enormity of the moment settle in his chest. He wasn't a speaker. He wasn't a performer. But he was an artist, and maybe the world didn't need him to be anything more than that. And yet, a part of him worried the truth might not be enough, or worse, that it would be too much. Hudson placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You don't have to do it alone." Elias met his eyes, Will you help me? Hudson's answer was immediate. Yes, every step of the way. The warmth of that promise wrapped around Elias like a fragile safety. 2 days later, the Midtown Art Collective held a press conference. A modest space, white walls, soft lighting, chairs arranged in orderly rows. Cameras lined the back wall, lenses trained on the podium at the front. Reporters murmured among themselves, their whispers blending into a low, buzzing chorus. Elias stood behind a curtain near the entrance, heart pounding so loudly he was certain people could hear it. He wore a simple black sweater and dark slacks, not because he wanted to appear humble, but because anything more elaborate felt dishonest on him. Celia Hart stood beside him, her expression gentle but resolute. Whenever you're ready. Elias inhaled slowly. He wasn't ready, but he stepped forward anyway. When he emerged onto the small stage, the murmurs shifted into rapid clicks of cameras and bursts of whispered recognition. He approached the podium with careful steps, as though the ground beneath him might crumble. He gripped the sides of the wooden stand, hands trembling. His voice nearly caught in his throat, but he forced himself to speak. "My name is Elias Monroe," he began, the words quiet but steady. "And I am the artist who created the painting in the Chelsea alley." A ripple of motion passed through the crowd, pens scribbling, microphones shifting closer. Elias continued, "I didn't leave it there as a statement. I didn't leave it there for attention. I left it because I thought it had no place anywhere else." He swallowed, emotion rising in his chest. "I've spent years feeling unseen, unheard. The world of galleries felt like a door I wasn't allowed to knock on. So I stopped knocking. And when my work was rejected again, when I was told it had no value, I believed it." He let the weight of the admission rest in the air. But the alley didn't judge it. The darkness didn't reject it. And somehow, someone saw it. Someone understood it. And because of that, the world saw it too. Cameras flashed. People have come forward claiming to have shaped me, to have guided my work. But the truth is, my art came from loneliness, from loss, from the parts of life that hurt too much to speak about. No one mentored that. No one taught me how to bleed. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. "I am grateful you saw something in my work, but it didn't come from praise. Came from surviving." A hush fell over the room. He stepped back slightly from the microphone, his final words soft but resolute. "So if the world insists on knowing me, then know that I am simply a man who paints because painting is the only way I know how to stay alive." Silence. Then a single clap. Then another. Then the room erupted. Not with frenzy, with reverence. Elias stood stunned by the sound, his heart pounding. Celia wiped at the corner of her eye discreetly. Even the reporters looked momentarily human, touched by something they hadn't expected to feel that morning. When the applause faded, Hudson moved to his side, whispering in his ear, "You did it." Elias exhaled shakily. "I didn't fall apart." Hudson smiled.
No.
"You stood taller." Elias caught the faintest quiver of pride in Hudson's expression. Something deeper than professional admiration. Something personal. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Handshakes, small conversations, gentle embraces from strangers who found pieces of themselves in his vulnerability. But through it all, Hudson remained close, a steady presence amid the swelling tide of attention. That evening, the two walked back toward the alley. The crowd had thinned, replaced by a calm reverence. Candles flickered beneath the painting, their warm light dancing on the brick wall. Elias stood before the artwork that had changed everything. Felt different now, not abandoned, not rejected. Felt seen. "It's strange," Elias murmured. "I thought leaving it here meant the end. But it became the beginning." Hudson stepped closer, his voice low. "Because the world needed it. And it needed you." Elias turned to him. "Do you think I'm ready for what comes next?" Hudson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied Elias's face. The exhaustion, the hope, the quiet courage. Then he said, "I think you're stronger than you believe. And I think what comes next, you won't face alone." The unspoken meaning between them pulsed like a heartbeat. Elias felt the breath catch in his chest. For the first time in years, he didn't feel afraid of the future. He felt held by it. A tear slid down his cheek. Soft, quiet, unhidden. Hudson reached out, brushing it away with a tenderness that made Elias's heart ache in a new, unfamiliar way. A way that felt like light. The alley around them blurred into shadow and candle glow. The painting, his painting, shone like a stubborn flame refusing to dim. Elias whispered, voice breaking with emotion, "I thought I was invisible." Hudson shook his head gently. "You were never invisible. You were just waiting to be seen." Moonlight softened the world around them as the two men stood together in the alley. Artist and critic, stranger and savior. Two lives woven together by a painting that had once been rejected, but had now become a beacon. Elias closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt whole. And beneath the winter sky, in an alley once forgotten, he understood something profound. Sometimes, the place where you think you've been discarded is the very place where destiny finds you. The world would keep spinning. More paintings would be born. More storms would rise. But for this moment, this quiet, luminous moment, Elias Monroe finally felt seen. And finally, he felt enough.